and welcome back to Tech Talk with Boyum. Today, we're talking about something I know a lot of SMBs feel every single day. You invest in software, you add more tools, but things still can feel a bit chaotic. And our topic today talks about that, like from chaos to control, like why SMBs need local advisory and market knowledge and not just software. And to talk about that, I'm joined by Milton from Fonseca, one of our partners. And Milton, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Leonard. Appreciate you for having me.
So let's start with the bigger picture. In the region you operate in, what role does advisory and consulting actually play in making digital transformation successful?
Yes, so the market that we focus on is on the manufacturing and distribution. Those are the two industries we focus on, Leonard. And the reason behind it is because I started working with companies only focused on that. Originally, I was an IT consultant. I used to have an IT consultant. I still have it in New Jersey. And as you know, we work with different various companies. But then when I started implementing ERPs, my focus started in manufacturing. So I learned a little bit about manufacturing. And one of the things I understood early on is that I noticed how people in their businesses in distribution and manufacturing, these are very honest people. These are very, people that tackle the front end. They actually get physical and they get things done, right?
Mhm.
They don't just sit behind a desk every day.
Yeah.
They're the ones that actually make this economy move. So, and I realized that they have this mentality that they think that they need to work around the technology. And technology has done a disfavor to them because of, 80s, 90s, 2000s, where there was
Mhm.
a limitation of technology. So what we do, we simply try to break that mentality, to say, look, we're here. Your responsibility is simply to tell us what your problems are, and our responsibility is to help us figure those out. And you can see a drop when you talk to them, when you see them in their eyes, a sense of relief,
Mm.
because all this time they've been trying to figure out on their own, right?
Yeah.
And when somebody actually cares, Leonard, this is what actually happens. So I would think that that's one of the main things. There are two other things based on that, is that because we focus on these two industry, we are blessed to have to see patterns, right? We see from one company to the other or to the other one, and we come in and people are like, well, we have unique problems, and they are unique because these are our own problems. But our responsibility as consultants is to be able to provide the best solution. And because the more we do this in these industries, we're able to more easily identify those common problems and be able to provide them solutions that have been proven, right?
Mm.
Not just solutions that we come up out of the blue because we've never seen it before. Thank God that we're able to see this very often. So the likelihood of seeing a common problem is very high. We see it all the time.
Mm.
So those are the two main things. And I think the last one is um, when you have companies that uh, they know the art very well. They know what they do every single day. However, there are companies, or world companies that are like 100 years old there.
Mm.
So somebody's been there for 30, 50 years, and
Yeah.
you know, they forget, or like what's outside. They want to see what, they don't know what's outside. They need a little help. So what we do also is we do process review. We review the processes, we understand how they're working, and we try to optimize the process, to help them out.
Okay. And like, would you say like do most companies feel like because technology isn't always enough alone to solve some of these challenges that these companies face? And why would you say that that is?
Sure. So technology is a tool, right? Google is a tool. Everything's a
Mm.
tool. And my father, who has worked in construction all his life, he said that there are two things every single time you try to solve a problem. First is you need to spend time to understand the problem. And second is to identify the tool to help you fix the problem,
Mm.
right? So if you go in, with like a hammer trying to just, try to to make your way without knowing exactly what you're trying to do, you're not going to go anywhere. And to us, it sounds common sense, but this is the reality: is that software implementators per se, in general, we have a responsibility to really comprehend the problem and then be able to identify the actual tool that is needed. We actually have a methodology, Liard,
Hmm.
that is called a gap analysis. I'm actually a bit of a geek, a process geek, if you might call
Hmm.
it. I like documentation, and I think the big difference between a business and a hobby is a hobby. You may like the art and you may be good at it, but with a hobby, you do it for fun. You do it once in a while. With a business is you have a well-defined process, so you can scale and then you can optimize, right? So with this gap analysis, what we do is we simply you typically we go on site for about 3 days, regardless of the company, because we do this all the time. And then we come back and we write a report. But what's important in that report is that we intimately get to know the customer. We intimately get to know the process from a software agnostic perspective.
Hmm.
That means that regardless of what technology is, we're more curious about their art. How do they do it, right? We're not going to do what they do, but we're just trying to understand their business process. And hence the name is gap analysis because we try to identify any gaps and inefficiencies.
Hmm.
Makes sense? So what
Yeah.
we do is we take that, and there's two reasons, Leon, usually why we do this. We're either trying to find a new tool. For
Hmm.
example, we're trying to implement a new ERP or new software, or they already have the software, they're unhappy, or they simply want to optimize it. So we need to tweak the tool. And those are the two main reasons why we do a gap analysis. And
Hmm.
the way to make sure that this is worth it for the customer is that they can actually measure, right, what they've done in the past and how is it going to be later on. So I just wanted to share that with you is going back to the question exactly, why is the technology not enough? Because you simply cannot just pick any random tool. You really need to get to comprehend the problem intimately, and then you as an expert need to be able to pick the right tool from the toolbox and apply it based on your experience the best way that you can do it.
And you talked like you just mentioned the gap analysis and how you close that gap. Are there any other differences that customers see between getting the software and then working with a local advisor in the region that you're in?
Oh yes, 100%. So typically, there's a cost to absolutely everything, right? I'm a small
Mm.
business owner. My first business was I was like 18 years old there. I used to
Mm.
have a landscaping business, right? And I didn't know what I was doing. So what I did, I just bought a bunch of machines and started cutting grass and whatnot and cutting trees. So that was very interesting as a college student.
Mm.
Um, but what happens at that time is I don't know how to use those tools. So what happened is it just took me a heck of a lot longer. My risks were through the roof, right?
Mm. Mm.
So that's really what happens when you get the software. And yes, you may be technical savvy, you can install it, you can play with it. But the thing is, you're going to be able to install it based on what you learn as you learn. And the most expensive thing is really not the amount of time you spend doing it or the rework because you have to reconfigure it. The problem is that you're not you're not applying that tool in the most optimal manner. And then what happens is your company is missing out.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
you know exactly what the process of your business, and you know based on your experience what the best methodology of a tool it is, because sometimes you can use a tool, for what it's meant to, but also if you have experience, you can use the same tool for different various reasons or different various methodologies, right? Or
Mm.
ways. So, and that's where experience comes in. So if somebody comes in and just buys the software and installs it without going through a local advisor with proper experience,
Yeah.
yes, they can get it done. Yes, they'll spend time and they'll be like, that's fine. I'll spend my weekend. I'll get it
Mm.
done. The thing is that their business is not going to really take advantage and have the high return on investment that is really necessary, that is really wanted and desired, right,
Yeah.
from buying software.
And you mentioned like yeah the return on investment, the difference in that they see. Are there any other ways that you would measure the success of the advisory work beyond just getting the software live for your customers? And how would you say that Boyum in particular is empowering your team in terms of that?
Yes. So first of all, it's important to know that a lot of times when people implement software, they simply implement software and they forget how to measure if they got it right, right? So there is a way that you can measure an output based on your current system workflow and then measure afterwards. So you can actually have just as it's not brain surgery, it's actually quite simple there. For example, when you have, let me give you an example. You have a sales orders, right,
Mm,
for custom products that they're making, right, or pre-configured options, right? So before, let's just say you have an area where everything had to be written down in hand,
mm,
right?
mm,
And you can only do, one person can only do two or three orders a day just because of the amount of time that they have to go back and research.
mm,
And then you can put a configurator and then you can go back and say, well, how long did it take with the configurator?
mm,
And typically, because the whole purpose of technology is information, just having the information right there is going to optimize. So that's number one, is make sure you're able to measure this out. The second thing is you need to you get to see it in measuring the things that they didn't measure before. Like I said to you, I have a lot of companies that are very old, and they think they're doing one thing, but they're
mm,
not really quite sure. When you see somebody sit down, and to you as a consultant, it's like, oh, I just made a report, it's not a big deal. But when you get to see somebody's eyes come up and show them an actual report of their production or their, warehouse live, when they didn't see this information before live, meaning as transaction gets done, you get to see that aha moment. And that's just a phenomenal feeling, Lord. To us, because we
mm.
do it every day, we may undermine it. We're like, it's just a report. To them, life changing. And as a father, I tell you, it's also a big differentiator. You get to see this. How do you know? Is people when I come in, you get to see people a lot more frustrated, working
Mm.
late at night, trying to come up with reports, trying to figure out what's going on. They blame each other because they're frustrated, they don't know what's going on. It's not once the software is implemented, provided that you have a well-defined business process and somebody who's
Mm.
doing it right, let me tell you, the point of all this is to make sure that your culture gets better. People get to go home to see their kids a little earlier than before. And that's really,
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
the most important thing, how I see that.
Can you actually share like a customer story or like a particular like story where you could clearly see that the local expertise like helped a company move from that chaos that you described, like the internal issues, the late working hours, and to actually having feeling like they had more real control of their processes.
Oh, sure. I'll give you a couple of them, right? Just because it's gonna, I think it's gonna help people understand what they really should go after. So one of them, like I mentioned to you, the configurator. We had a company who 100 years old, man. They had drawings in the basement. They don't know what they have.
Mhm.
And when we tried to implement the configurator, we started asking tough questions like, what options do you have? This is the models that you make. What options are there? It's like, well, we have it. And where are they? They point to their brain, looking at they're in my head. I said, all right, well, no problem. Just write them down, put them on an Excel sheet.
Mhm.
And it was identifying how difficult it was. And after a while, we realized that it was really going to this one guy that kind of knew everything in the back end,
Mhm.
and you speak to the guy and he hardly ever goes on vacation. And he's been in that company
Mhm.
for like 50 years. And on top of that, the second thing is every time they produce something, they never had enough things in stock because they weren't prepared enough. Not everything, some things were missed and the
Mhm.
cost was wrong. So by simply implementing a configurator, number one is the business that is not at risk to depending on just one person's mind. Number two is in production. Well, they know exactly what they're going to be needing. And number three, the costing person is actually going to know, how much actually this thing cost to make. So that was one story that I found very interesting. And they actually almost decided not to implement the configurator just because they were estimated to be like 6 months per configurator, Liord.
Mhm.
And,
Mhm.
and I and I came in and I showed them that they were doing it very statically, and I showed them a very dynamic way, and they went from doing one configurator for 6 months to do all configurators in about 3 months.
Yeah. Okay,
That was
great.
very interesting. I think the other example I like to share with you is something that happens is very, very common in production. People have they under they just don't realize how much this is really impacting the business, and it's really planning, scheduling of the resources. You have machines, you have people, and we all get adjusted to the everyday. We come in, we see a bunch of people, a bunch of machines. You got to do this, you got to do that. But what happens is, nowadays it's all about doing the most with the least amount of cost, right? That's the whole point of
Mm,
business, and it's very
mm,
demand. They change, right? Because now internationally, you have businesses competing. So it's not like it was 20 years ago, right? Or 30 years ago. So what happens is this is where we come in, and they have no idea. They don't even know that there's tools like advanced production scheduling, APS
mm,
in BEAS that can do this, right? They have no idea how it works. And all their times, the best that I've seen is they do it in their own Excel sheet that they created, and only one person understands it. The other one is that they have a big board that they kind of put things on it. And the third one is they just have, a conversation in the morning, if they get lucky, or it's just somebody after they get coffee there, they just decide what they're planning to do today, call it a day. And Lear, what happens is I went to this business one time, and it was very heartbreaking because I knew that the company was in a tough situation, and we
mm,
work with them because it's not cheap to implement an ERP, and this is something that is important to note. Many companies who really need an ERP system, yes, they're doing it because they're growing, but also there are companies that realize that they're in need of they need to fix the things inside, and they just simply don't have the tool, and they just need the bare minimum. All right, they don't need all the bells and whistles. They just need to understand costing. So when I sat down with them, they were very hesitant to really implement advanced planning scheduling. They were saying, "Look, we just do the bare minimum." And I said, "I understand inventory is one of the major problems that they had there. Obviously, they don't know where things are. But the second thing is they really didn't quite had a grasp of how much they can produce. And when I was able to implement the PS, just nothing fancy, just explain to them about setup times, how to group work orders together to reduce the setup, how to reduce cleaning, how to reduce loading and unloading equipment, that sort of thing. That's what APS does, right? And then understanding, hey, you have three machines that are identical, but
mm.
you have this one specific a little bit faster. Let's prioritize that, and then so when I did that, I was able to really help them see that there's a tool that can actually accommodate that. And to them, it was just like, wow, we had no idea. So that was another story I think that I wanted to emphasize that as a software implementator to my colleagues out there and is to really try to really help understand the customer and really help them out. And to the customers is to really challenge us, really,
Yeah,
because there are tools out there that can really sincerely help them, and just find the right person that can get the job done.
yeah. I think listening to this podcast is, I'm sure there are SMBs who have been listening to you talk about the struggles that companies you have experience with have faced, and they recognize themselves a lot in that, and they might be considering implementing solutions or tools, for example, Boyum solutions to mitigate these issues, but they might be feeling overwhelmed by the implementation journey. They might feel like they don't need it. You talked a bit about it, but if you were to give advice one-to-one to that listener that can recognize a lot of this, what would you say?
Sure. So I'm going to share a little bit about my story because I was not a manufacturer and a distributor. I was an IT consulting guy, and the only experience I had in my life was, like I told you, landscaping, and my father was construction. He took me to
Mm,
work when I was 8 years old. Um, that was my experience. But so what happened was, my first experience was I was able to work with a customer that I had the opportunity to sit down and really get to know his manufacturing area. I was able to go there on a daily basis to meet with people to see how they work. And after spending some time there, I was able to really see and understand how and what they do. And the reason why I mentioned this, Laird, is because as an IT consultant, what I did was always focus on software. I always knew how to install and configure it. You put me anywhere, I can figure that out. But implementing software for a business, the first thing you need to understand is the business itself. So what I recommend is, we can't be specialized at everything. Otherwise, we're not specialized. We're generalist. So, and that's okay if somebody's a generalist, but if you're going to be focusing on an industry like manufacturing, distribution, where you have these complex tools that are really not complex, it's that they're very robust. That's really what it is. And the complexity comes to those that they just need to have spent time learning it. Is first and foremost is identify what industry you want to focus on. Find people who are well versed and experienced, not because they have only looked at it from the from their perspective of installing software, but really have an understanding of how the world works within that industry, and then learn the software. It's a heck of a lot easier. For me to learn a piece of software, if I already know the industry, super easy. I mean, much easier, rather than learning the software for an industry that I have no idea. And this is where a lot of SMBs have a really difficult time. And there are different ways to go about it, right? There are very small standard businesses that most small businesses can do with no problem. Boyum has an array of tools to get this done, right? There's different levels depending on the complexity or necessity of the customer. So you can start small, right? But when you get to see those complex areas and you're still trying to grow the people within, if you don't have that ability to have in-house people, there's nothing wrong with asking for help, right? And this is one of the reasons why we exist, is because we help other business partners implement these complex tools. And we work with them. We're not a competitor of them. We simply work with them, and everybody in Boyle can talk about us. But the reason why I say that is this is an opportunity that you can say, look, you can take your business to a higher level without sacrificing quality of service. So this is what I would suggest, is really find the people first that know the industry, then tackle the software. And if you don't have those expertise, start small. That's all. Just start small, one step at a time.
That's great advice. I think you gave our listeners definitely something to think about. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Milton, for joining us and sharing your expertise. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Lord. My pleasure. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
And for our listeners, that was this episode of TED Talk with Boyum. And until next time, see you.